The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning, everybody, here from Phoenix, in our little University of the Seven Rays headquarters, such as it is. I think we are headquartered more in cyberspace than in any one particular place. I'd like to welcome you all, those who are here, and that would be so far some, well, maybe almost 30 of us. But anyway, Alex, Angela, Anne, Annette, Antoinette, Bianca, Bibi, Carl, Catherine, Clesia, Diane, Gretchen, Jan, Jean-Pierre, and Joe, of course, is with us helping on the other side. Joan, and well, John Pluto was here a minute ago, but maybe he'll come back. He's in italics right now. When you go into italics, you're gone, okay? Karen, Catherine, Marianne, Nienke, and Tia, Tiu, Tuija, Victoria, and Winnie. And so on the other side, BL and I and Joe are trying to manage things to you. Would you like to be put on the other side? I can do that. You're self-muted, if you like. Maybe I'll just put you there. Okay. Well, I thought I could anyway. Maybe Joe, you could put make Tuija an organ.
I'll do that. It's okay.
Is it okay? All right. We'll just have to be careful not to mute her. She'll self-mute. All right, friends. Well, let's have a little alignment, and then we'll get into a new section of the book. My goodness, we've done almost 20 pages. Well, 2025 is still 7 years away, so if we manage to hang in there somehow, we'll keep going with this and with other books. I think in some of these meditations we do, the readings are from the books. Like, for instance, when we have the Ask program and Tuija is doing the Thursday reappearance of the Christ meditation, which the Tibetan has given us, basically she's reading through the entire reappearance of the Christ book. And we're doing this with the Glamour book, and there are others that we will have to initiate as we go along. So we can have a very, I would say, a very full study of these materials before 2025. And why is that necessary? Because DK said he can give us, following 2025, material according to what we have assimilated up to that point. So obviously, if we're somehow ignoring or treating lightly or going loosely over what has been given from 1919 to 1949 in his second installment, well, he is limited because we have not made proper use of what has been given to us. So the study factor in meditation, study, and service must certainly be emphasized, and in order to do that, you have to clear the time to do it, you know. And things have to be kept in proportion, of course, and we offer plenty of meditations, and the service meditation can be a service, and we're serving that way, and you have your own service in your life, which you are going to determine by yourself. And some of that service, DK has told us what it is: prepare men's minds and hearts for the reappearance of the Christ, and perpetuate the triangles work, a work which must go on. You know, strengthen the hands of the men and women of goodwill, strengthen the hands of the new group of world servers, of which we hope to be a part. All of that is service. So for the next 7 years, meditate, study, and serve. And what we're trying to do also is offer the opportunity to study online together, using the group mind so that we can really assimilate more and more of this magnificent and basically unassimilable teaching. There's no way, as the Tibetan said modestly, he says, I've given you more than you can ever absorb. It's a straight statement of fact, and we just have to accept it. But okay, you know, we will continue to assimilate and try to be ready for the next great gift, the next great installment, which we will have to attack all over again in the coming century. Suppose it's offered to begin with around 2025, just as the second installment began to be offered in 1919. You can see that it would take about a century to absorb it, and even then we won't absorb it. And by that time, we'll be ready for the true entrance into the Aquarian age. So indeed, what the Tibetan has given us is a series of bridging treatises. Three series, basically, one with Blavatsky, one with Bailey, and who knows whether Alice Bailey will be the repeat of the next, or whether some other initiate will appear who will help to carry this forward. All right, friends. So in the silence, we feel each other's presence in the presence. And wherever we are, we are gradually soul infusing personalities. We are the soul in incarnation. We are consciousness within the personality fields, and also consciousness extracted from the personality fields. We have to realize we're trying to establish a dual location in the body and yet out of the body, as it were. And it doesn't just refer to death or the astral plane. It refers to the extent to which our consciousness is submersed in the lower worlds, and the extent to which we can abstract that consciousness into the causal field and thus become the true initiate, and thus become successful in our meditation. And so we are offering ourselves as an instrument to the ashram in really what is beginning as a public onslaught against the predations of glamour. Both DK and Alice Bailey have said that they have a horror of glamour, causes so many problems. But we have to understand how we are being manipulated and directed by world glamours, and extricate ourselves, and thus help extricate others. So we will work together, and there are all these interrelated glamours. I think today we'll have another revisit on the glamour of egotism, or egoism, and its result, egotism. And egotism at the level of the nations is nationalism. And we can all see how in a period that is supposed to be moving towards internationalism of a cooperative kind. At least that's how the hierarchy would have it. We have the last-ditch fight of the petty minds and psyches that want to preserve the old nationalistic, triumphalistic order. It's a big problem. And so, we'll just sound the Om, confirming our intention. All right. Now, let's get into our reading. You know, as I say, we have the study portion, we have the academic portion. We have the meditation, which itself is the service. There's service in line with the group, and DK has given us so many opportunities to serve with the group. And then there's the service, which is individuals we render to our immediate environment, trying to approach all circumstances with principles, according to spiritual principles, and with loving understanding, or basically with intelligence, love, wisdom, and sacrificial spiritual will. If we wish to stay alert during these next 7 years, which will be climactic, I mean, you know, maybe 2025 will come and this huge conclave gathering will not be immediately noticed by disciples. Yes, they'll know something's really going on there, but by the time it hits the ground, it can be, you know, the 14 years that it takes to bring an idea into expression. But we're aiming towards that year. Many disciples across 2025 group is really focusing on that, and we're focusing on that, and I suspect all disciples associated with Master DK's work will bring this into focus more and more. Okay, so let's have a little, we'll have a little reading now. And we have sort of moved through that section on symbolism. Of course, it's ongoing, and we have to learn how to practice spiritual reading. And what this means is that our consciousness has succeeded in focusing consciously on the third subplane of the higher mental plane, and we are beginning to be capable of spiritual discernment, meaning that no matter what we see, we can detect the spiritual pattern which is operative behind it, and which is basically the cause of it. So this, we have to learn to exercise these cities, powers, response to group vibration, learn how to work and create and love and express and manifest together in the soul group manner. And finally, something that we really have to work out within ourselves, and that is the sacrificial will of the soul. One day it will be clear to us how much the solar angels have relinquished in apparent forward progress in order to help us. And we, the bulk of humanity anyway, maybe what's a bulk, 80, 85%, something like that, I guess, will be off to training to Sirius and come back in the next solar system, I suspect, or who knows how long that training takes. Will it be the next solar system, or will it be sooner? Maybe it's still this solar system, but return anyway to a solar system and help the up-and-coming human race of the time that has just been made human, and we will, for those who go to Sirius, will participate in learning how to render the animal into the human. We have vast experiences before us, really unimaginable. We've been hiding, or has been hidden from us, our amazing potentials, but we certainly have to learn how to do a few fundamental things before those potentials can be revealed to us and can open to us. So anyway, he seems to be beginning a new stage of the book, and he's saying, what I have to say to you as regards the subject of glamour falls into certain broad generalizations, such as, and he'll go over all of these, and we can think with him on these causes, the nature of glamour, the causes of glamour, and the dissipation of glamour. Even the nature of glamour is somewhat difficult for people like ourselves to apprehend. And actually, I just see here for a moment, please, that we're really beginning on page 19, and now we're into page 20. Try to keep a little order here anyway. Okay. As we proceed, we shall divide our subject up into greater detail, but in this instruction, I only seek to get certain broad outlines into your minds so that the theme may fall into right places in your thoughts. So look, what is the hierarchy? The society of organized and illumined minds. That's one of the ways of describing it. It's a very mental way of describing it. The society of organized and illumined minds. It's not exactly Christ and his church, triumphant, which is also the hierarchy, you know. So there are many different ray perspectives from which we can describe the nature of the hierarchy, but notice what he's trying to do here. He's trying to help us, and it's needed, you know, help us organize our minds. Now he's going to talk about some common misinterpretations of certain familiar words about which the users of those words have no profound idea. There are four phrases which have for long been bandied about. You don't hear those words much anymore, but it means used lightly, used casually, used unthinkingly, and so forth, have been bandied about among so-called occultists and esotericists, not the real thing, right? They are glamour, illusion, Maya, and the expression, the dweller on the threshold. I remember, you know, in my early days of my study of these things, I got hold of two books related to Masonry, and it was a long time ago, 50, more than 50 years ago. And one of them was Morals and Dogma by General Pike of Masonic fame, and the others was Manly Hall's The Lost Keys of Masonry. And in this, it showed some of the Egyptian rituals in this Lost Keys of Masonry, and you saw the candidate holding the Ankh, you know, the symbol of Venus and illumination and the power of the Azure Center, up before a gigantic, horrible-looking figure that was blocking his way through the portal. That was my first exposure in this incarnation to the an image of the dweller on the threshold. Maybe there's some truth to it, but it's a little bit glamorized and exaggerated, and he's going to talk about that. So these words, glamour, illusion, Maya, and dweller on the threshold, they all stand for the excuse me, same general concept or some differentiation of that concept. There's such fluidity in the use of these words. They don't just stand for one location and one particular thing, although he does bring them into that proper assignment as he moves along. Speaking generally, the interpretations have been as follows, and they are only partial interpretations. Now, there's an element of truth in them, as we will see, but they are almost in the nature of distortions of the real truth. So in the popular approach to these words, we cannot find the real truth. And our problem is here that our consciousness and our minds are limited. So now he's talking about the misinterpretations and the kind of distortions of understanding due to the limitations of human consciousness. These definitions have crept into human thinking, and unless we go deeper than what is here presented, then we're not going to have a real handle on what these factors actually are. So glamour has been regarded as a curious attempt of what are called the black forces to deceive and hoodwink well-meaning aspirants. Okay, I think he finds this somewhat amusing. Many fine people are almost flattered when they are, quote, up against some aspect of glamour, feeling that their demonstration of discipline has been so good that the black forces, who almost never trouble with people like ourselves, the black forces are interested sufficiently to attempt to hinder their fine work. You sense the humor under this. Their fine work by submerging them in clouds of glamour. It's a little bit self-centered, wouldn't you say? And he says nothing could be further from the truth. That idea is itself part of the glamour of the present time and has its roots in human pride and satisfaction. We remember when DK told a story about a disciple in the older days who was himself, and he was actually, as he said, quite keen on his own achievement and his own discipleship. And we are basically, when we think of glamour in this way, we are still at the center of our own stage, and we have exaggerated our importance. So that we imagine that somehow the Black Lodge is interested in us. And usually, they're much more effective than that. They don't just trouble to work out some kind of attack upon a minor aspirant or disciple. It does happen at times, and there are some descriptions of that to one of his disciples, RSW, who was under some kind of attack, and he says, look, I'm not really going to help you here because you wouldn't learn anything if I did. So apparently it wasn't so horrible that she couldn't handle it herself. But then again, these were disciples who were surrounding DK and were really members of his ashram and had definitely progressed to that particular point of usefulness. So when we think a little bit too much of ourselves and we think we're somewhat spiritually important and the Black Lodge is focusing upon us, it's obvious that we have failed in one of the 5 necessary Ds, like the letter D, discipline, dispassion, discrimination, and decentralization. That's where we have failed. The decentralized personality, followed by detachment, which is the soul attitude. So only people who are still pretty fixated on themselves as a lesser personality, but an important one, will be affected by this particular definition of glamour and its misinterpretation. Maya. Okay, glamour is emotional. We usually think when it's not being used as a general term. Maya is usually etheric when it's not being used as a huge general term, like the world Maya and the whole universe is Maya and all that. That's also true in a way. Maya is oft regarded as being of the same nature as the concept promulgated by the Christian scientists that there is no such thing as matter. That's a problem, isn't it? The consciousness longs to be so absolute that matter itself is considered an illusion. This is denial, which is more than a river in Africa or Egypt. We are asked to regard the entire world of phenomena as Maya, and to believe that its existence is simply the error of mortal minds. Well, obviously mortal mind makes a lot of errors, of course, and a form of auto-suggestion or self-hypnotism. In other words, we've suggested to ourselves, we've hypnotized ourselves into being, into interpreting these phenomena as real. But when we release ourselves from that hypnotism, when we stop auto-suggesting, when we clear up the errors of mortal mind, then no phenomena will be seen as real. Now, I think the reality is that universe after universe, according to the Great Breath, we have to continue to deal with the lesser apprehension of ourselves, because in a way, all things are self-perceptions. I'm going to repeat that. All things are self-perceptions of the universal being. So it may be a limited perception, but it is a perception, and it may lack many of the higher realizations, but nevertheless, it is a fact in consciousness, or what I call an actuality, in a way, rather than a reality. Okay, anyway, the Christian Science approach, I've attended some Christian Science lectures, and well, the people who lecture, they really have sold themselves on this perspective, and of course, it's a very stubborn mindset, and they don't realize that the mindset itself is part of the Maya. Through this induced belief, we force ourselves into a state of mind, it's usually because of a recoil from the horrors of the world and all of the pain we have to go through on this particular planet of releasing sorrow and purifying pain. We force ourselves into this state where we just deny the pain and deny the cause of the pain. The Buddha has a different way of dealing with it, and we'll come to that, hopefully. So through this induced belief, we force ourselves into a state of mind which recognizes that the tangible and the objective are only figments of man's imaginative mind. Well, from a very deep level, this can possibly be so, because, it's the ideation of the one universal being that basically produces all things through self-observation and self-perception. However, the results among most people who try this kind of attitude is they just deny what's in their face and what has to be dealt with if they're going to remedy the chaotic situation which exists below in the world of becoming, and which must somehow reflect one day the world of being. And they'll never get to that point. They just deny it. You see, we have to reconstruct the world of becoming so that it reflects the archetypes in the world of being. And if we just ignore the world of becoming, we're never going to do that, and our redemptive purposes go astray. So this in its turn is likewise a travesty of reality. DK doesn't use that word travesty lightly. Once he talks about the image of the masters presented by the what in a broad sense is called the I am movement, and of course the presentation of the masters is just, well, it's just childish, and he calls that a cheap comedy, and I think the word travesty is is used there. That's the same idea. We don't interpret well, and we come up believing in things which are preposterous, childish, shallow, all that. We have to deepen our mind. Now, working under the supervision of Master DK through his books, obviously anybody who sticks with that is going to have their mind deepened in quite a profound sense over the years. And though, you know, I've been in it a long time, and I'm sure there are many here that have been in it a long time, and you've probably noticed the deepening of your mind and the deepening of understanding. Okay, now here's another more or less misinterpretation about illusion. It's regarded in rather the same way, only as we define it, we lay the emphasis upon the finiteness of man's mind. Well, you know, due to our mental limitations, we've created the Maya. Okay, that may be profoundly inwardly true if we identify ourselves as the universal logos, okay? But in terms of practicality and living in the world, we cannot dismiss it. Now, here we are with our mental faults, and we're focusing on our mental limitations. We do have a finite mind. Even the universal logos of this whole universe has a finite mind. The only infinite mind is in the pre and post cosmic state, when there is no universe, or at least the purity of it is when there is no universe. So anyway, our minds are finite. The world of phenomena, in this case, note, is not denied, but we regard the mind as misinterpreting it and as refusing to see it as it is in reality. Well, the idea of refusal is interesting. Sometimes I think it's just limitation, but notice that we're not denying, there is some truth in this. We consider the misinterpretation as constituting the great illusion. Now, when I have thought about illusion, this is my own way of going about it. I have thought of fragmentation. You know how we look for unity of consciousness, and all things are not only interrelated in an archetypal unity, but they are really one, okay? But then I've said to myself, if my eye was the eye of a grasshopper, I could approximate what illusion is. Now, you know, maybe from studying biology, that the grasshopper and maybe some other insects have a compound eye. They don't have a round eye like the mammals have and like man has. It's geometrically fragmented. It divides everything up into pieces. And when we do that, when we have the type of a consciousness that divides everything up into little pieces and we can't put it back together in an archetypal form, that is illusion. The more the fragmentation, the less the unity, the greater the illusion. And we overcome illusion, DK tells us, through intuition, or the dispelling of illusion through the buddhi. Now, the buddhi obviously makes things whole and starts to remove those artificial boundaries between all of our perceptions, so we begin to see things in a unified manner. So, that's kind of my reference point regarding illusion and fragmentation, but the factor of misinterpretation is definitely mentioned by DK when discussing illusion, and later in the book we'll get into that difficult area where he discusses illusion rather than glamour, and I think we'll learn something there. Of course, if you're a student in the Moria Federation, there is a section in our early work where we take on the factor of illusion. Now, the next thing is the dweller on the threshold. It's usually regarded as presenting the final test of a man's courage. Well, you know, if you see the Manly Palmer Hall illustration in this book, the Lost Keys of Masonry, you would see why courage is required. It's the sum total of everything we've done wrong for all of our lives. It's the sum total of all our unredeemed sins presented in some form of elemental entity, which it takes a lot of courage to face. But of course, the truth is lying deeper than that rather over-dramatized picture. So a test of a man's courage, and as being in the nature of a gigantic thought form or factor, which has to be dissipated prior to taking initiation. Now, let's see if I can get this here. Let's see. Okay, here we go. Just what this thought form is, few people know, but their definition includes the idea of a huge elemental form which bars the way to the sacred portal, just as in the Manly Palmer Hall book, or the idea of a fabricated form constructed sometimes by the disciple's master to test his sincerity. Again, you see how self-centered is that attitude. The master is spending his time to cook up this big thought form to see whether you're really worthy, and all the time there you are, the one who is not decentralized. You're standing in the center of your own stage and everybody's concerned about you. Okay, so it's the opposite of decentralization. Some regard it as the sum total of a man's faults, his evil nature, which hinders his being recognized as fit to tread the path of holiness. That's not bad. There's some of that in the accumulation of all of our sins and unfinished business, all kinds of unexpiated karma. There's something there of the truth, but nevertheless, none of these definitions gives a true idea of the reality of this dweller. Now look, it turns out, and maybe you remember from your reading, that the dweller on the threshold can even be the highly developed entirety of the integrated personality. Not necessarily a bad thing at all, but just something that's so good in its own world that it's hard to move beyond it into higher values and higher possibilities, because you like exercising that particular integrated personality. There's another analogy to that. Look what happens when you hang on to your highly developed causal body. Then, you know, that comes later. Then you can't follow the Christ. He says, you know, take what you own or have and sell it and give the money to the poor and follow me. So, you know, in that is some magnificent advice. But on a higher turn of the spiral, it's the same thing. We become attached to something that's very good, highly developed in our nature. And we don't want to move on to the uncertainty of what lies ahead. For instance, following the Christ, it's full of immediate uncertainty, although the end is sure. So these, you know, we could ponder on some of these things, and we all of us have these factors. We have the glamour, we have the Maya, we have the illusion, and we have this unified synthetic combination of all of them, which is the highly developed integrated personality, and before that, the personality with all of its faults and its unfinished business, with karma not expiated. So it has a lot of ugly things in it that under the process of initiation, we gradually expiate. Under the process of karma, we gradually beautify and balance. Okay. I would point out here that generally speaking, these four expressions are four aspects of a universal condition that is the result of the activity in time and space, which itself is illusory, of the human mind. So basically our own mental excuse me, limitations have created these factors, this disorganization, this exaggeration, this misinterpretation. All of these things have been created by the limitations of our mind. We do not interpret reality correctly, and we cannot get the energies together in the right way. Now, there's the world of becoming and the world of being. This is from the Greek philosophy. In the world of becoming, we have all kinds of chaotic energies in flux and process. What are they trying to do? They're trying to relate to each other in such a way that they reflect the archetypes in the world of being on the monadic and logoic planes. So we are faced with chaos initially, and we're faced with the illusion of the reality of time and space, and all of this is because our mind can't yet really grasp the truth of the relationship. So obviously when a highly mental master like Master DK comes along, he's teaching us the illumination of the mind so we can overcome these lower factors which inhibit the true spiritualization of our personality. Okay, so it's the mind, the activity of minds, and he makes an exclamation point. Ponder on this phrase, for it gives you a clue to the truth. And so when we all get together and think in the wrong way, we create massive thought forms which condition other people, and before you know it, we're seeing things as they are not really. We're seeing things through illusion, through glamour, and we're in chaos, okay? So we have to clarify our minds and learn how to think together as disciples and initiates in the new way. Now, maybe he's going to elaborate here a little more. I'd like to go on just a little more. The problem of illusion, this is interesting, lies in the fact that it is a soul activity and the result of the mind aspect of all souls in manifestation. You know, you are an extended consciousness. In a way, your consciousness from the higher levels is extended into the lower worlds, and basically you are the soul in incarnation, but you're not the fully illumined soul in incarnation. It is the soul which is submerged in the illusion. And the soul is our own higher consciousness, cramped, compressed, desensitized, and made subject to lower worlds. This is the soul in incarnation. And the soul in incarnation at least, that fails to see, notice, fails to see with clarity until such a time as it has learned to pour the light of the soul of the higher mental plane through the mind and the brain. Now notice how we use soul in different ways. Soul is a very fluid word, and people pull their hair, you know, how can I define that word soul? So the way you can define it, you know, is on different levels. It's always consciousness, but it's consciousness subject to the various limitations of the prakriti or matter in which it is immersed. Is the soul upon the higher mental plane the full soul? No. There's much more soul in the triad, much more consciousness, much more liberated consciousness in the triad. Is the triadal soul the full soul? No, it's not. The soul of the monad, we might say, the awareness, the consciousness of the monad is much more liberated, but it's all soul, it's all consciousness, cribbed, cabined, and confined, as it is said, by various grades of matter. So we are all of us submerged in various levels of the great illusion, or specifically submerged in the mental plane, in the astral plane, in the etheric physical plane. But eventually we tap the light of what we are, and it pours through, and it shows us how to free ourselves that illusion, how to free ourselves from the illusion in which we have been submersed. Okay, so the problem of illusion, that's one of the sticky things about it. It's a soul issue. Okay. All right. The problem of glamour, now this is, I think, is a wonderful linking of illusion to glamour and a good way to think about it. The problem of glamour is found when mental illusion, mistakes in mentality, misinterpretations, incomplete understanding is intensified by desire. When mental illusion is intensified by desire. Well, let's look at World War II. Germany, who was the epitome of glamour in that great struggle, like Japan was Maya and Italy was illusion. Germany thinks it's the master race, that the Germans are the master race. And that's a thought. That's a huge misinterpretation. It's based on an ignorant interpretation of occult-leaning books, because they were really into occultism, those people. Then what happens? They get really enthusiastic about that idea. They get so enthusiastic that it becomes almost an obsession. They desire to force the master race upon humanity and to be the rulers over all of all humanity, and to be rid of those who demonstrate impurity. Now, of course, there's a huge irony in here, and it all comes from the fact that people don't really see themselves all that clearly. If you look at Hitler, if you look at Goebbels, if you look at, what's his name? Oh, I've got his face in front of me. That other guy that was the head of the SS, and anyway, none of them looked like the master race. They all looked like rather poor specimens of human beings. So they were so disgusted with themselves on a certain inner level that they projected that disgust on others and sought to eliminate Himmler. That's what it was. They thought to eliminate others, and this is amazingly how it can work, that the very people who are undergoing kind of a sense that purification is needed, like second initiation, but they don't know how to do it, and they completely misinterpret, and they don't understand psychology or their own projections. They see it all outwardly, and they project upon others their own extreme self-hatred and dissatisfaction. So, it's been said, why is it that so many of the leaders of the Nazi group don't look like the great Aryan? They look rather peculiar. Why is that? Okay. And that's probably the psychological dynamic. So anyway, mental illusion then is intensified by desire. That's what happened in Germany. What the Theosophists call kama manas produces glamour. Now, what is kama manas? Kama is pure sentiency and manas is pure thought, but they are somehow conflated. They are moved together in such a way that you have what Carl Jung calls feeling-toned thoughts and thought-toned feelings. You have an inseparable combination of the two, and you can't get them clear. So there's no true objective thinking when you are subject to kama manas, however necessary a stage it may be as we progress. So, and here's the definition of glamour, and it's really a different angle, isn't it? It is illusion on the astral plane. The misinterpretation has been dragged down, your erroneous thoughts have been dragged down, your limited mind as it sees the world has been presenting you with an interpretation that you really, really want. You put all your desire nature into it, and you create a huge distortion which varies from the truth. So, you know, when we start to use the fifth ray, as Master DK would have us do, we learn how to separate Kama from Manas. And by the time we reach the third initiation, with the Ajna center prominent and the fifth ray of Venus prominent and the fourth ray of Mercury bringing in the intuition, we have learned to separate Kama from Manas. And overall, we are not subject to the human types of glamours. Now, who knows what other types of higher glamours they may be. So we've been able to keep them from occurring simultaneously and corrupting each other. You know, and as Roberto Saggioli said, try to look at yourself the way a scientist would look. Excuse me, little water here. He says, don't react, just study. As if you were studying objectively some specimen of something else. Don't react. Don't get involved with what you see. Just take note of what it is. Now that kind of attitude, that fifth ray attitude coming through this Ajna center and its fifth ray is going to go a long way towards separating Manas from Kama. And we all have to do that, and we will be given the rays to do that. All right, the problem of Maya. It's really the same as above, plus the intense activity, there you go, produced when both glamour and illusion are realized on etheric levels. You want to do something about it, you know? Now you have a thought, you intensely desire for that thought to be followed. What are you going to do? So the doing occurs on the etheric level. Now here's this, you know, really, I would just have to call it this amusing and arresting definition of Maya. It is that vital, unthinking, emotional mess. Now, the minute it's unthinking, you know, your habit nature is involved. You just do it. It's an automaticism. When you look at your astrological chart, you want to find out how Maya is operating. Take a look at your moon, because it will give you all those automaticisms which you are dragging over from other lives or which you've habituated in this life. You don't think about it, you just do it. So, you know, sometimes you really have to observe what you do, because so many of our actions are unconscious. They're just on the habitual nature. It is that vital, unthinking, emotional mess. Yes, brother of old, that is the word I seek to use, in which the majority of human beings seem always to live. Not a very sanguine interpretation of how we're living our life in a vital, unthinking, emotional mess. And that's why the very first veil, which has to be lifted on the etheric plane, is called the veil of impulsion. It's like, you know, it's just like you start doing things before you think, okay? But the amazing thing about the fifth ray is that it thinks before it does. And that is what can separate all of these automaticisms from each other and bring them under control. Now look, we're coming into a seventh ray age, aren't we? And for 2,500 years, the seventh ray will accompany the energies of the sign Aquarius. So we all know that the seventh ray is the ray of order and of rhythm. And obviously, you need order and rhythm to get rid of the mess. Some people say, well, we're entering the greater age of Aquarius, and so we will have the seventh ray for 25,000 years. I don't know that it is legitimate to make that jump, but at least for approximately 2,500 years, we have that seventh ray to help us straighten out that unthinking emotional mess. When you get the sixth ray and the third ray together, you have a real problem, because there's that impulse, do it now, and the third ray becomes chaotic and disorganized at first, and then you really are involved in chaos, emotional and activational. Now, the dweller on the threshold. What is it? You know, he's summarizing these things. It is illusion, glamour, Maya, as realized by the physical brain and recognized as that which must be overcome. Now, notice there's a word here, and it is, that word is recognition. Recognition. Because, you know, by the time we reach this point, we're seeing this whole kind of integrated personality and how it is an obstacle to soul life. It is the bewildering thought form, you know, and very, very old, because we drag it over anciently from all of our past mistakes, with which the disciple is confronted when he seeks to pierce through. Notice the piercing, you know, the horn of the unicorn, the fifth ray, the first ray, piercing, the laser beam, when he seeks to pierce through the accumulated glamour of the ages and find his true home in the place of light. So it's a more integrated factor that's been around a long time, and it's filled with habituation. We're just, you know, we come into this life. The word is skandhas, skandhas. We come into this life with many skandhas, or tendencies, which we have not resolved from the past. And they are habitual, and we don't even give them second thought. That's just how we are. That's how I am, you say. Okay, and these things have to be seen, have to be analyzed, have to be pierced through, have to be dissipated if we're going to live the true life of the soul. All right, so that DK has given us then a few better definitions. The above are necessarily only generalizations and the result also of the activity of the analytical mind, but they, you know, which is not complete truth, but at least you've analyzed something with real clarity, reasonable clarity, but they serve to embody a part of the problem in words and to convey to your minds a definite thought form of what we shall later discuss in detail. Now that's all I'm going to, I think that's enough. And of course I always overestimate how far we're going to go. Oh my goodness, 1 for 2, you know. I don't know that I thought we would get that far, but now I'm going to copy this up here. And where am I? Okay, here it is. So this is how far we got. We started on page 19, and we got as far as, someone tell me, page 22. Okay, 19 to 22. Added 1 page to it. Page 19 to 22. And we meet again on the 30th of March. I'm not sure about this. I'm going to have to let you know because Tuija and I and others have so many Easter, Aries, full moon related things going on, but maybe this can happen. I'm not sure. If it's canceled, we will let you know, and then it'll have to be carried over into April. All right. Now, friends, we've gone through some material here about glamour, illusion, Maya, and the sum total of all of that brought over the centuries, the dweller on the threshold, for good or for ill. That dweller, of course, can be the perfected personality, but, you know, our virtues can sometimes be the cause of our vices. So if we get too fixated on our personal perfection, it prevents us from entering the world of unity. Okay, and the world of the soul. So now, let me open this up to your questions and your statements. If you have anything you would like to say, and if I miss you, then I think Joe or BL will remind me that I've missed you, okay? and I don't mean to, but you know, there's a lot to handle here. Yeah. All right. So your thoughts, your questions, your statements, your you know, we've been through so much. I can't really make all of this really, really small. I can't do that. It's just too much. But you know, let's just run down the nature of glamour, okay? And you know, just reviewing it with our eye, okay? What we have been through. We're dividing our subject. These are only partial interpretations. He gives us some of the distortions of the truth. Glamour rooted in pride, Maya in denial of the phenomenal world, illusion, yes, partially as misinterpretation, and I offered the idea of fragmentation, and the dweller on the threshold, really much more than this big evil thought form that stands between you and the portal of initiation. And it's all dependent on the distortions of the human mind. And I want to just say, write down here that mind, oh, ho, ho, there we are. I want to write down here that, why doesn't it allow me to do this? Hold on just one second. I think I can do it now. No, I can't. Something is really crazy. Maybe I can do it here. All right. Mind is the slayer of the real. Okay, it's also the revealer of the real, tells us, Master Decay tells us, but at first, lower concrete mind has created all of these kinds of conditions, or at least it exacerbates them. We can't go to a caveman or somebody in Middle Lemurian times who has not much mind and say, mind caused your myopic condition. We can't go to a person who's living in Atlantis, highly emotional, not too thinking, and say mind has caused your glamour. But mind does exacerbate these situations for the modern Aryan fifth root race disciple. Okay, I see what the problem is here. All right. So none of this is true. I've been...
Michael, you have a hand up.
I do, and I hope I haven't, yeah, thanks, BL. I hope I haven't lost myself. It looks like I have I copied something here, and I just want to get rid of it before it messes me up completely. Okay, and then I'll look for that hand that is up. All right. And, geez, I've got to go down. Aha, Joe. Oh, Joe? Okay.
I just wanted to make note before we move too far along that next week, when we would have had glamour, you're scheduled for the pre-full moon. So
yeah, yes, that's correct. That's correct. So thank you. So we'll try to figure out something. When do we do it? It might be still 2 weeks from now or something like that. There's so much going on that week, and I'll just show you just a little example. This is not a wonderful calendar, but right in here, you see the 30th, Aries pre-full moon, and Tuija has the Good Friday broadcast, and it's quite a full day. So we'll have to get back to you about whether this can be done at all at that time. Thanks, Joe. Okay, now was that the hand that was up? Okay.
yes.
Okay, okay. All right, so now, friends, questions, thoughts, glamour, illusion, Maya, the dweller on the threshold. Let's pause for a minute. Now, if you stand back, as it were, you, the soul in incarnation, and you look at your, inwardly look at your etheric physical, astral, your lower mental, your whole personality. Do you sense the operation of any of these factors as an inhibition to greater soul living? I think just try to take a look and see what you see. Because remember, most people, he says, are living in that vital, unthinking, emotional mess. That's not too optimistic a statement. And the whole of humanity's consciousness is shrouded in glamour. And we're just about misinterpreting everything in terms of what the concrete mind does to reality, fragmenting it and denying unity. And then we have this thing we've created over the many centuries. And if we get too stuck in the personality, we just don't become the soul in incarnation, and we don't learn how to live as a soul, which we have to do if we're going to be harmless. Who lives consciously as a soul, whose nature is love, whose method is inclusiveness. These are factors that the dweller prevents. Well, you know, get into the habit of trying to see yourself scientifically, as if from a distance and without reacting. You know, when we react, that's going to be a sign that something's going on there in the emotional nature, which needs to be dealt with. Doesn't mean you're cold like a stone, but the idea of losing your emotional control and reacting to something, I do it all the time, you know. It means something has to be solved in there, and probably that trigger is not even known to us what it really is. So then he does go on and he says, illusion is a soul activity, and glamour is intensified illusion, plus desire, and Maya is a vital, unthinking, emotional mess, and the dweller is a huge thing, and it's an accumulation. And these are generalizations, but we have to see, are they operating in our life? Okay, so now, Alex, I see you, and please just go ahead.
Yeah, what you just said about, hi. What you just said about Maya as an unthinking emotional mess just made me think of a quote by Bertrand Russell, which is, most people would rather die than think, and most of them do.
Wait a second. Most people would rather die.
Most people would rather die than think, and most of them do.
Okay.
But I'm just using that as a way to get in here and just call attention to the handout with the announcement of a talk, which it would be so wonderful if anyone from the Glamour group could attend. It's on March 31st, and you have a big gap in your calendar there. Which I'm nothing to do, I'm sure. March 31st at 6 p.m. It's a 2025 initiative, and the topic is taking back.
Go ahead. I've got it. Go ahead.
Taking back control, discerning truth and finding clarity in the complex information age.
Okay.
And it's an update, an extended version of a previous talk given on this topic. And it's going to be on the evening, well, in Europe, it will be the evening before Easter Sunday. And
okay, so
I hope people can attend. So just calling attention to that.
Are you giving that? Alex?
I'm giving the talk. Yes, I am.
Excellent. Okay.
Yes.
So I just want to make sure that it doesn't disappear. You all download that now, you know.
It's 6 p.m. GMT. 6 p.m. GMT on Saturday, March 31st, and I've put up the link to register for the webinar. But if anyone gets messages from 2025 initiative regularly, they'll get the announcement anyway.
Okay, that sounds.
Put that link right in your diary.
That sounds excellent.
Meditate together.
Okay, sounds very good, Alex. I just want to see if it's really true that there's nothing going on. My goodness, you know.
It's because
Aries,
it's
Aries full moon. Yes, okay.
The full moon is earlier in the day.
Okay, so, but Alex, what about my birthday party? Are you sure? I love the day. You know, it's great to be born on the same day as Bach and Descartes. Different rays, but I'm happy about it.
Having a birthday party.
You know what Master Moria said? He said rather sarcastically, he said, pretty soon they'll be celebrating their birthdays. You know, and I just, so, okay.
I knew you were Aries. I didn't know it was on that day.
I get the idea, you know.
Happy
three quarters of a century, you know. So anyway,
well,
it sounds like a great
Michael,
thing.
many happy returns early, and I just want to take the opportunity. I don't feel I thank you enough. And
okay,
you're always talking through our computer here in the house. You know, we're listening to everything. So.
If your computer doesn't break down, all is well. Okay. All right,
Thank you so
Alex,
much.
thank you for sharing that. And there was something that Olivia wanted to share, and I'm just trying to think about where that is. We have to send that to everybody. It's upcoming, and I don't know where that is. So anyway, she couldn't make it right now because she just got back. So, okay, good. We'll try to send that to you if we find that, everybody. So Alex's event is on the day of the full moon. And please do join us also for the full moon service, which is earlier. And let's see, what time is this, Alex? What time?
6 p.m. GMT.
Okay, we're good. Okay.
7 p.m. in the UK, 8 p.m. in Europe, afternoon in the States.
Okay, we're nowhere near any kind of
time.
We're nowhere near any kind of conflict. We're very good. Okay, thank you for
thank
for
you.
letting us know about that. Okay, now let's go back here. So your thoughts, your further thoughts, people. Okay, we have now. Okay, Jerry. Okay, now Jerry, let me just see what I've got here. And you are unmuted. You can speak.
Thank you, Michael. You hear me okay?
Yes, you're good. You're good.
I'm fairly new to your group here, but the idea of glamour has been something that I've been well aware of, and found the prospect of participating in the dissipation to be extremely interesting from the time I first came across Alice's writings some 15 years ago. So I'm very glad to be able to join this group and to have the opportunity to study through this with you. My own experience as far as glamour goes, and I'm throwing this out to you to see if it seems like I might be on the right track of it, particularly as it involves the individual, because it seems to me that as disciples, this is where we also need to focus our attention, not just simply on the dissipation of others, the glamour out there on the universal level or the collective level, but to be very careful about seeing what we face ourselves. And I really love this explanation here, which I had seen years ago, but had missed and passed by, because it does seem to match up very well with my own experience, which is the glamour being the combination of the work of Kama and Manas, both the feeling nature and our mental nature, if you will. That's the way I've come to term it. And my own feeling is that, and thoughts about this have been that it came about primarily because of the disconnect between the mind, mental nature, if you will, and the feeling nature. They speak two different languages, and the language of the feeling nature seems to be more or less like if you would, a yes, no, good, bad, feels good, feels bad, so forth. That's how it functions on that in some gradated levels. But the mind doesn't like to have things so vague, and everything must have its cause. And since our mental nature is so good about manipulating things, somehow it seems to have got wrapped up in the idea that perhaps it can manipulate the feelings as well. And
interesting.
Does a very poor job on it. And in so doing, that you end up with a lot more suppression, rejection, denial, and then therefore the projection also, and the same thing happened not just with the so-called negative emotions, but also the positive ones. We can become to believe we're not good enough for this, and anyway, it just goes on, and I'm kind of working with where I've studied in psychology as well. But so you're right. It seems that the key to dissipation on the individual level is to first be able to separate the two. And that's been my experience.
Yes,
and Manas. Yes.
Yes, very illuminating, Jerry. Thank you. There is a usefulness to Kama Manas, and interestingly enough, Venus is associated with Kama Manas, and Sirius is also. And there's something about Kama Manas which is useful to the artistic temperament. I think that in the field of the arts, people are putting Kama Manas to use in a very constructive way. And there's something there as well, that the fourth ray of all rays seems to be the ray which somehow combines the Kama and the Manas. And it can be used if you're not looking for exact purity of definition and utter pristine mentality, as the fifth ray sometimes does, or just pure emotion, then under the fourth ray, we can use that Kama Manasic field in a constructive manner, raising things to the throat center and then beyond, and even to the asna center. In other words, we put things together in a useful manner rather than in a way that distorts. So I think, I go back to my life. I used to be an opera director long ago, and I think I was using Kama Manas all the time under the fourth ray, trying this blend of how does it feel, what's happening, what's the drama, and it was useful. But there comes a time also, I think, as one moves, as we all will one day, to the third initiation and the purer fifth ray, that we really have to separate these things and see what is this pure mentality untainted by bias. Because always there seems to be in the astral nature some form of bias, some leaning this way, leaning that way, and not seeing things in proportion. And of course, Libra will come in and help us with that as well. So very good thoughts, Jerry. Thank you. You've been in it a long time, it seems.
I have been. I studied for a while with the Arcane School, and then I've been drawn different directions and so forth for whatever reasons. But I found myself watching your work over the years, and I've just I found this opportunity and felt it was time to return and find out
what's going on here.
Yes,
hey, appreciate your presence.
Can I say one thing? You said something about the fourth ray and about being able to use Kama Manas, and I agree totally with that. But it, in a sense, and tell me if this seems correct, because it's kind of flashed in as you said it. When you're doing artistic things, you're working more or less in a physical realm, or somehow with tools, if you will, be it music, be it paint, be it words, so forth and so on. These are all basically things that are very well manipulated by the mind, right?
Yes, yes, that's correct.
Yeah.
That's correct.
And so when you work with it like that, you can immerse yourself to the feeling, but somehow you also maintain a certain separation. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah. It seems to me that, you know, with creative imagination, you are not necessarily the victim of what you feel. You are apportioning your feelings for the best dramatic, artistic, beautiful effect. The mind is always the supervisor. I'm reminded of certain actors, you know. I think there was an actor back in the 19th century called Edwin Booth, and he was a famous actor. He might have even been a relative of John Wilkes Booth. And he once got totally into his part, so he did not maintain a discriminative analysis of what he was doing while he was doing it. And he thought it was the most wonderful thing to be totally that character. And he was later told that it was one of his poorest performances because he did not maintain that critical objectivity, that eye upon all that was transpiring in his acting. So I think, you know, we have the observation as well. And later, DK tells us that the fourth ray type will, in its following of the urge to the creative life, will be involved in a certain kind of occult meditation, which will produce an entirely new art, not based only on emotional impulse, however well that impulse is regulated. So we have new things coming up in our new renaissance. And I think, you know, with the fourth ray, you have to be very flexible. You have to be able to change your position all the time. It's a ray ruled by Mercury. And so you have to be in the feelings, out of the feelings. At the same time, you keep that eye on whatever you're doing so that there is the critique operating. And people say, well, then you can't be authentic. But I think that, in fact, you can be, and that's the way to do it. So both are possible, it seems to me. And the fourth ray is very important for blending these two in a constructive manner rather than a distorting manner, you know.
Thank you. It was very helpful.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Jerry. Glad you're attending and with us here when you can be. Thank you so much. Okay. Okay. Good. Vera, see you there. Okay. Go ahead, Vera. Yeah.
I'm looking at some clarification on the soul and egoic lotus. So on the screen there is the soul incarnation is learning to put its light through the mind and brain. So say we are in the middle. Our egoic lotus is maybe developed in the middle. Few petals opened and many of them still to be developed. Now, so the soul's influence is limited by the egoic lotus development. When we say in meditation we are trying to align with the soul, are we making alignment with the lotus or beyond? Yeah, please clarify.
Yeah, if I can do that. To me, the solar angel is a high initiate, which has, in a way, fallen twice. It has been to Sirius for training, and it has fallen back onto the cosmic physical plane. So the monad that is the solar angel, as they, all beings are essentially monads, has received its training and has fallen. Then the fall is an act of sacrifice, and apparently from the chart that we have, oh geez, I don't know if I can I get that? Yeah, from this chart, no, this is Tuija's, and this is not the right one, but I'm going to try to AAB diagrams, and I'm going to go here and hope for the best. Okay, so when we look at this map, we see that this collection gives us the solar angels on the Buddhic plane. Okay, so it's already been on the cosmic astral plane. That's the trip to Sirius, takes place in cosmic astral levels, about which Master DK says he doesn't even, know he hasn't been there. Okay, then there's a second fall, but then there is a projection from the fullness of the solar angel as it can exist on the Buddhic plane into the higher mental plane. And I call that projection the angel of the presence. Or at least it's as much of the solar angel as is deemed fit to project, to merge with the consciousness of the downflowing monad. Now, let me see if I can try to be clear about that. So, let's see. Well, coming from above, we have the monadic. I tell you what, I'm not even going to use this particular, even though it's not as good as the one that Tuija made. I'm going nevertheless to use the one that she. No, let's see. I can't quite. All right, let's see if I can get back to normal. Yes, I can. Okay. Now, here we are. This is it. We assume that the solar angel is in its fullness, as far as it can be full, on the cosmic physical plane, is located as a Buddhic being, a heart of fiery love and all that, so many wonderful love names for that being, on the intuitional plane. But it projects a fragment of itself onto the higher mental plane and works in the matter of the higher mental plane to create the egoic lotus. And the thing that the solar angel does in projection, having pervaded the universe with a fragment of myself, I remain. So there's this pervasive ray or fragment of the solar angel, which is coming to the higher mental plane. It blends with the human monadic consciousness. Now, all monads are one, and there's only one monad and all that. But because of mind in the universe, we divide things. So from the level here of the monad is a projection of that which the monad is into the higher mental plane. And here's the solar angel off to the side, and it's projecting a fragment of itself into the higher mental plane. And these two consciousnesses blend.
Yeah.
The monadic consciousness and the solar angelic projection blend on the higher mental plane. And when we say we're contacting the soul, the first thing we're going to contact is that ray of the solar angel, which is projected onto the higher mental plane. Later, we make contact, as we approach the fourth initiation, a greater fullness of the solar angel, which is the non-projected part, and which will help with the destruction of the causal body. So the egoic lotus is simply a structure, a form through which the human monad at that stage of limitation can express on the higher mental plane, and through which the solar angel and its ray can make available to the consciousness of the monad certain qualities, abilities, perceptions, I-ness, whatever you want to call it, that it has, and that the monad in projection coming downward needs. So you've got a blend of consciousnesses going on here in the egoic lotus, the solar angelic ray and the monadic extension. And then, I call it the angel of the presence, because then it kind of gets out of the way and reveals the monad from which the original consciousness came. So, I just have some words for it, but obviously it's something we have to go through on the higher planes as we approach the fourth initiation to really understand. Is that a little clarifying?
Oh, yeah, it was wonderful. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Yeah.
If it's useful, that's good. Okay, Vera, thank you. Now, let's see who else would like to say anything or offer a question? Yvonne. Okay. Right. Okay. As I understand it, the mind is that function of our brain, or working through our brain, let us say, that elaborates physical, astral, and mental matter. Well, it, you know, in my book on the seven rays, Tapestry of the Gods, I've got a whole bunch of functions of the human mind and what it does and how it may relate, how it may do those functions when it's ruled by different rays. Now, I can't remember all that, but basically the mind is going to take things apart and put them back together, you know, in the simplest way. It's going to focus on intensely on some small aspect of possible perception, clarify that perception and relate it to another clarified perception, and then Mercury will arc with light and will bring together those two factors, contributing to the bringing together of all the pieces of the jigsaw until it represents the archetype that we find on higher planes. So you say it elaborates. So I'm, you know, what is the meaning of the word elaborate? I'm trying to give you maybe my interpretation. It is not equal to mental, right? The mind and mental. Well, it depends on how we, you know, it just depends on what we mean by a word. The concrete mind is mental, the higher mind is mental. The Buddhic plane of pure reason is called the plane of transcendental mind, the highest function of Mercury. It's mental too, but in a higher way. And then we get to the atmic plane, and we discover that the atmic plane is the third plane from above. And because it's the number 3, it also is mental. It's the unification of mind and will. And when you look for a planet that unifies mind and will, we've got Saturn, and Saturn does rule that atmic plane, and it is a mental planet. So, you know, I guess we have to figure out what mental, how we're going to assign the meaning. Expresses, okay. So let me read it again. The mind is that function of our brain that expresses physical, astral, and mental, expresses in, and arranges and rearranges, and links up and separates. It does all those things, you know, it piece by piece, separating, clarifying, linking. Check in my book, Tapestry of the Gods, about the various functions of the mind. I can't even tell you where it is. It's been a while, but it's in there. It is not equal to mental, right? Well, and then I said it depends on how we define mental, and then maybe more than elaborates, I mean expresses. So look, the mind is the great arranger. When chaos prevails and everything is in constant relationship with everything else, moving too fast to form any stable relationship, mind enters under the law of fixation and fixates the various items which have to be related to each other, until eventually in this chaotic world of becoming, we begin to approximate the archetypes of the world of being through the exercise of mind, having rearranged the chaos so that it reflects the archetype. And the 7th ray, while, you know, it's a balanced ray, it's mental, emotional, physical, but it really gets in there to rearrange the chaos. I guess that's all I can say for the moment about that. Okay, okay. Anything else? Now, I'll tell you what, I know there's something coming up here I want to give you from Olivia, who couldn't make it, but with Joe and BL, if we can send that to everybody who's on the list once I discover it. it has to do with, of course, the tremendous distortions that are going on in the news and in the information field. And Alex, you're getting into that also. All right. Anything else, friends, before we actually begin our little glamour meditation? And we'll let you know about, yes, go ahead, please. Yes.
This is Joe.
Joe.
I wonder if you're referring to Tapestry of the Gods, Volume 1. I think it's page 345, where you have the attributes of the mental field. Is that what we're referring to?
That sounds right.
Yes, it's
So
a
just,
table, and we'll send that out to people. I have a copy of it.
okay, great. And on Makara, you can download Tapestry of the Gods for free. It's just right there. And I think it's got some things. It's written a long time ago, but I still think, even though I've changed my mind on things, that there's something of value in there. In trying to, I think I used a lot of fifth ray writing that book. I don't think I have a fifth ray mind per se, but I think I somehow appropriated that ray and used it analytically, and then trying to put everything back together. The mind separates and puts together, separates and puts together. So that's one of the major functions. Thank you, Joe. Tuija, I just want to make sure that, is there anything that you wanted to say here? Because I know that sometimes you're self-muted, and if there is, you can unmute. And anything about the programs that are coming up. Okay. Okay, because I think you could speak if you want to, because you're only, yeah.
No, hello. No, everything is okay.
Everything's in order? Okay.
I don't have anything.
Okay. Around my house, I always have to make sure things are in order, or my wife will be standing nearby with that look, So she's a lot better at getting things in order than I am. All right. Now let's have a little meditation, friends, and thank you for being here. Thank you for being here on a weekly basis. I appreciate that very much. Okay. Right. All right, here we go. All right. So now, there's a goodly number of us gathered here, over 40 of us, and we can make an impact. And we'll just be in silence for a little while. And while we're not going to go over everybody's name, we'll just sort of realize the group personnel as people who are going through the soul infusing process. And we are really assembled souls. And in the silence, you feel the energy gathering, and you feel the relationship between us as spiritual beings consolidating. You feel this. Now we realize that the work we do is not without its dangers. It's not taken casually on the inner side, because there are those forces which just want to augment the glamour. So when you go on the inside and you use the occult methods offered by hierarchy to weaken the glamour, they don't like that. So we're going to use the protective formula. He wouldn't have given it to us unless it was necessary. And it involves the sign of the cross using the two eyes, and he calls it the cross of divinity. So we're going to imagine that we're creating a lighted cross from the center of the forehead to the center of the chest, and then the horizontal arm between the two eyes. And we'll see it light up as we speak and imagine its presence. As a soul, I work in light, and darkness cannot touch me. I take my stand within the light, I work, and from that point, I never move. Lighted cross. And each of us has this lighted cross as if in the front part of our aura, and the group as a whole is protected by this lighted cross. So we always maintain that, you know, and can refer back to it. And now we're going to go through the preparation of the light. The vital light of the etheric body, etheric physical, the light of the mind with its mental capacities, and the light of the soul with its unifying capacities and its ability to really bring in the qualities of light, but love and power also. So we imagine that we lift up the vital light from below, light of matter. Let us say, you know, we'll leave the astral body out of the picture for the moment, but we'll think of this as the etheric physical light. We lift it up to the plane of mind, that vital light to the plane of mind, and we blend it with the light of mind, which allows us to think and to reason. And to arrive at greater light through the reasoning process. But these two lights are blended in our creative imagination. The vital light of matter, etheric physical, and the light of mind. So the two are one. Two lights are one. And now we think about soul light, and you can visualize that in various ways, but maybe, you know, somewhat above your head. And we try to imaginatively contact that light. It's a real thing, the light of the soul. It is there. And we want to bring it into closer rapport with the other factors within the personality. So we bring down that light. Imagine the bringing down of the soul light onto the plane of lower mind, the higher part of the plane of lower mind, and we imaginatively blend the three lights. The light of the soul, the light of the lower mind with its various capacities characterized by reason, and the vitality from below which sustains and supports the vitality of the systemic etheric physical plane. And we imagine that we see three lights blending into one. Three lights blending into one. It's the root of our instrument, which is both a means of perception and a weapon for dissipation. And we will say together, followed by the sacred word, an affirmation: the light is one. And in that light shall we see light. This is the light that turns the darkness into day. Now this is the root of our searchlight. So we have the three lights as one under our control on the mental plane. And as we say the formula, we will visualize the great searchlight that we have been creating. We're going to turn it on, as it were, and we'll turn it on so that it will go forward as a beam upon the astral plane, where in this type of meditation, our work lies. So let's together, as it were, turn on our beam and imagine in a group sense that all our individual beams are contributing to the group beam coming out of the brow. And we say the formula: radiance are we and power. We stand forever with our hands stretched out, linking the heavens and the earth, the inner world of meaning and the subtle world of glamour. We reach into the light and bring it down to meet the need. We reach into the silent place and bring from thence the gift of understanding. Thus, with the light we work and turn the darkness into day. That's what we're doing with our beam as we direct it to various problems on the astral plane. We're attempting to turn that darkness, that limited light on the astral plane into the light of day. And now we're going to strengthen our being with spiritual will. So imagine the descent of will from the monad, from the etheric plane, into the soul nature, through the jewel in the lotus, and through the petals which particularly relate to will, the synthesis petals, the sacrifice petals, and one petal in each of the other tiers relating to will, and through the head center on the astral plane, the head center on the etheric plane, and reaching down eventually to the base of the spine. The will is descending. And as that will descends, we can use it to strengthen our beam. So let's use that will as we look at our mantram here, and we say, imagining that strengthening of our beam with power upon its beam. The light is focused on the goal. Now that goal, representing itself as the veiling clouds and miasmas, distortions, wrongly held energies, wrongly expressed energies. For today, we're going to deal with this problem which prevents real cooperation and helpfulness. It is egotism. It's the tendency to think that the personality is the real identity and to be cut off from the soul, cut off from the unitive factor. Basically, it's very intelligent, it's full of will, and it's cut off from the energy of love. And we pause for a moment and look into the world situation and try to see all the things which the presence of egotism has damaged, spoiling relationships, looking for dominance rather than cooperation, mistaking the part for the whole. What's going on in the world today which is being damaged by the inability to see the larger self, that's egoism, and by the effect upon the personality activity of that great misinterpretation, and we call this egotism. It makes a man, a nation, untouchable, uncooperative, unassimilable. It's unloving. It cares only for itself. The Christ had no such boundaries. He was Neptune. He knew what was in man. There were no barriers. He could infiltrate and be present within the aura of anyone and know from the inside out and identify with his object of perception. But there are some people in power who are so encapsulated in their own self-admiration. So many dictators fall into this, that they never will, or at least not now, learn to cooperate and care for the welfare of the other. Because evil, says DK, is the result of an impelling sense of difference. And it's always egotism, which is the solidification of that sense of difference from others. So if we go the Christ way, we will have identification as others, and egotism and its philosophical root, egoism, will melt away. So now we're going to realize, we have realized somewhat, all the damage that can be done from this mistaken identity process, this egoism, this egotism, and we utter these words of power together. The power of our united light prevents the appearance of the glamour of egotism. And remember, when you have a good mantra, one that really carries what you want to think and say, you repeat it to yourself 3 times, driving the point home. The next word of power, the power of our united light negates the glamour of egotism from affecting humanity. The power of our united light destroys the life behind this glamour. So using our beam together, thinking in terms of these 3 words of power, we're going to enter the silence for 5 minutes, penetrating into this glamour, producing its weakening. and dissipation, we imagine this as a group process which can be effectively carried out. So we work with purpose, intensity of purpose, and in any way you want to imagine the weakening and dissipation of this glamour of egotism, that's up to you, but the strength of the group is with each one of us individually, and we think actually that we work together as a group. 5 minutes. And we have to realize that it is a sense of proportion that kills egotism. We're dealing with the issue of Leo and Libra. And you will notice that those are the two signs that are involved in what Master DK calls the reversal of the wheel, when we start moving forward against our selfish tendencies, till we finally do reverse the wheel later, I would say quite completely after the third initiation. So the sun of inclusiveness, of unity, of proportion has to shine upon the astral plane. Master Moria tells us, wear away irritation through cosmic perception. Well, we can wear away the chafing of the encapsulated lower egos through cosmic perception, seeing the big picture. And humility results an adjusted sense of right proportion, and people will cooperate and will not seem attempt out of fear always to be dominant, totalitarian, imposing their will upon others who bear a different aspect of the will, which must see the light of day and must not be suppressed. Proportion, balance, beauty, these will kill egotism. So we're going to withdraw our beam imaginatively back onto the mental plane. And there we have the three lights as one, but we turn the search light off for the moment. And we are grateful to the hierarchy for giving us the opportunity to assist in the destruction of these impediments and distortions which prevent truth and love from entering the astral plane. And we are grateful that we have been allowed to work alongside hierarchy in helping clean up this plane of the greatest illusion, as it is called at this time. And we sound then the Om 3 times, affirming the work which this group has done, and have a positive attitude about it. Always, every time, we can improve the situation a little bit. Okay, friends, Olivia, Tuija, and I thank you for gathering here on a weekly basis, and remember the science of triangles webinars, which are every other week. All of these webinars, they all feed into each other and augment the understanding of each other. It's all part of the Ask program. Ask and you shall receive. Seek and you shall find. Knock and it shall be opened unto you. Basically the root of the coming science of invocation. So what I'd like to do, we're just about at the end now, like to close with us saying the great invocation together. I think it's a good way to remind ourselves of what's important. And then next week, we have a lot going on, so I hope you can join us either in the broadcasts or with the webinars, webinar links, which you probably have and which I think are also in the chat box here. And the handouts, download them. They're useful. This improved image of the egoic lotus, which Tuija worked on here. Alex's upcoming presentation, read the 2025 initiative, and the various Ask events calendar for this coming week. From the point of light within the mind of God, let light stream forth into the minds of men. Let light descend on earth. From the point of love within the heart of God, let love stream forth into the hearts of men. May Christ return to earth. From the center where the will of God is known, let purpose guide the little wills of men, the purpose which the masters know and serve. From the center which we call the race of men, let the plan of love and light work out, and may it seal the door where evil dwells. Let light and love and power restore the plan on earth. The full moon in Aries is approaching, the beginning of the spiritual year, the astrological year. Let's gear up at a necessary point of tension to take full advantage of these possibilities. Thank you for coming and joining us. Many blessings, and we'll let you know about next week what's possible. It might have to be 2 weeks from now before we get back into this. Remember Alex's presentation here, as it is said. She's a speaker of the 2025 Aries initiative at the Aries webinar. And there's the link to register. Maybe you've downloaded it. And all the calendars there for the coming week. Okay. Thank you, and bye-bye.